Liora, I've decided I want a divorce. The words cut through the romantic air at Vercelli's, our anniversary restaurant. 15 years to the day, we sat at the same corner table where Adrian had proposed. The champagne he'd ordered sat untouched between us, bubbles rising like my hidden rage. Around us, couples celebrated their own moments, unaware of the planned cruelty at table 12. Adrian's timing was calculated, public enough to stop an emotional scene, intimate enough to feel personal. He leaned back, watching my face with cold interest, waiting for tears that would never come. The soft lighting cast shadows across his features, highlighting the stranger he'd become over recent months. His expensive suit, the one I'd helped him pick out for client meetings, now seemed like a costume for this performance. Instead of crumbling, I reached into my purse and placed a manila envelope beside his bread plate. Perfect timing, I said, my voice steady as stone. I have something for you too. My name is Liora Lorne, and this is how my husband tried to destroy me in the most humiliating way possible, only to discover I'd been building his destruction for months. Adrian thought he was ending our marriage on his terms, but he had no idea what waited in that envelope. Sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted. Stay with me, you'll want to see how this ends. Adrian's smirk faded as he stared at the envelope. What's this supposed to be? His voice carried that tone I'd grown to hate over the past year. The same tone he used when explaining why we couldn't afford a vacation while secretly funding weekend trips with someone else. I folded my hands calmly, watching him process the unexpected turn. For months, I'd imagined this moment, the exact second when his plan would start falling apart. The crisp white envelope seemed to glow under the restaurant's amber lighting, a beacon of justice he couldn't ignore. Open it, I suggested, cutting a piece of my salmon with deliberate precision. I think you'll find it interesting reading. His fingers shook slightly as he lifted the envelope's edge, and I noticed the wedding ring he still wore, a symbol that had become meaningless weeks ago. Around us, the restaurant hummed with anniversary talks, birthday toasts, and proposal celebrations. None of them knew they were watching the destruction of a 15-year marriage and one man's entire future. As Adrian's eyes scanned the first page, color drained from his face like water from a broken glass. Divorce papers, he whispered, barely audible above the restaurant's soft piano music. You filed for divorce? When did you? The shock in his voice was almost satisfying, after months of watching him plan his exit strategy. 3 days ago, I interrupted, taking another bite of the perfectly prepared fish. The same day you booked the hotel room downtown for you and Brielle. His fork clattered against his plate, drawing stares from nearby tables. The elderly couple to our left paused their conversation, sensing drama. The power balance he'd spent months setting up had flipped in an instant. He'd planned this evening to humiliate me, to force me into accepting his terms quietly to avoid public shame. Instead, I'd turned his weapon against him with perfect aim. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd chosen our anniversary to deliver his betrayal, and I'd chosen the same moment to deliver his reckoning. How did you? He started, then stopped, realizing the answer would only make things worse. Brielle Sloan from your office, I continued, my voice just loud enough for him to worry about who might hear. The marketing coordinator you've been mentoring so closely for the past 8 months. The one whose student loans you've been helping with using our joint savings. Adrian's breathing became shallow, his planned evening dissolving into panic. The confident man who'd walked into this restaurant an hour ago was rapidly disappearing. He'd underestimated the woman who'd handled our household finances for 15 years, who'd built a career in forensic accounting, who'd learned to trace money trails long before she'd ever needed to trace his. The skills that had made me valuable to corporate clients had served me well in unraveling my husband's deception. Liora, you don't understand, he began, but I raised my hand to stop him. The gesture felt powerful, commanding, something I hadn't experienced in years of deferring to his decisions. Oh, but I do understand. Completely. Keep reading, Adrian. It gets much better. His hands trembled as he turned to the second page, and I enjoyed every expression crossing his face. The restaurant's warm lighting cast shadows across Adrian's increasingly pale face as he read the asset division paperwork. You can't do this, he hissed, leaning forward desperately. The house, the cabin, my retirement account. You're trying to take everything. The desperation in his voice was music to my ears after months of careful planning. I smiled, the first real smile I'd worn in months. Actually, I'm not taking anything that isn't already mine. Section 3 explains how assets are divided when one spouse commits financial fraud. You might remember our postnuptial agreement from 5 years ago, when you insisted we needed better protection for your consulting business. The memory of that day was crystal clear, Adrian insisting we needed legal protection for his growing income, never imagining it would become his downfall. The irony was perfect. The very document he demanded to shield his growing income would now strip him of nearly everything. That was different, he protested weakly, his voice cracking. We agreed to equal distribution. Equal distribution, I repeated slowly, savoring each word, unless one party breaks the financial honesty clause. Which you did. Extensively. Adrian's phone buzzed insistently on the table between us. Through the screen, I could see Brielle's name lighting up repeatedly, her messages probably growing more frantic by the minute. She's wondering where you are, I observed, cutting another piece of salmon with careful precision. Probably getting impatient at whatever hotel you'd planned to celebrate your freedom in tonight. The thought of Brielle waiting in some expensive hotel room, champagne chilling, lingerie carefully chosen, brought me a dark satisfaction. His face flushed red as he declined the call, the phone continuing its relentless buzzing. This is insane, Liora. You're acting like a completely different person. The accusation was almost funny. For 15 years, I'd been exactly who he'd wanted me to be. Supportive, trusting, focused on our family rather than my own goals. The woman sitting across from him now had always existed. She'd simply been sleeping, waiting for the right moment to wake up. That moment had arrived with stunning clarity. People change, Adrian. Sometimes life forces them to. I gestured toward the papers in his hands. Keep reading. You haven't reached the best part yet. Page 4 contained the financial report, and I watched Adrian's face cycle through denial, anger, and growing horror as he processed the numbers. $43,000, I said helpfully, knowing exactly which line had caught his attention. That's how much you've stolen from our accounts over 8 months. Hotels, dinners, jewelry, and my personal favorite, the weekend in Napa you told me was a solo business retreat. His mouth opened and closed wordlessly, like a fish pulled from water. The metaphor seemed fitting for a man drowning in his own lies. The jewelry receipt was particularly enlightening. A 2-carat diamond necklace, charged to our account the same day you told me we couldn't afford to repair the roof. The restaurant around us continued its romantic atmosphere, other couples sharing desserts and anniversary kisses, unaware of the financial autopsy occurring at our table. Soft jazz played in the background, a soundtrack to his destruction. Liora, I can explain, no need, I interrupted, my voice cutting through his panic. The paper trail explains everything perfectly. The beauty of numbers was their honesty. They couldn't lie or manipulate or gaslight. They simply existed, damning him with mathematical precision. The forensic accountant you hired to audit my business records, Adrian said, his voice rising with anger, drawing more attention from nearby diners. You violated my privacy, went through my personal accounts. His indignation would have been laughable if it weren't so pathetic. Our joint accounts, I corrected firmly, emphasizing each word. Every single transaction I traced came from money we earned together. Money that was supposed to fund our daughter's college education, our retirement, our life together. The mention of our shared dreams, now shattered by his greed, hit its mark. The mention of our daughter seemed to hit him like a physical blow, his shoulders sagging with the weight of his choices. Lila doesn't know about any of this, he said quickly, panic creeping into his voice. You can't drag her into our problems. I leaned back in my chair, studying the man I'd shared a bed with for over a decade, wondering when he'd become such a stranger. Lila's 18 years old, Adrian. She's not a child anymore. And she's much sharper than you think. His face went white as the implications sank in. What does that mean? Keep reading, I suggested, nodding toward the papers he'd dropped. Page 6 has some particularly interesting photographs. The photographs were Brielle's downfall, though she didn't know it yet. Time-stamped images from the hotel's parking garage showing Adrian's silver BMW next to Brielle's red Honda on multiple occasions throughout the spring and summer. I'd hired a private investigator 3 months ago, though Adrian's sloppy security had made the job almost insultingly easy. Modern technology made infidelity remarkably easy to document when the cheaters were careless. "You had me followed," he accused, his voice cracking with outrage, as if he were the victim in this scenario. "You hired someone to spy on me like I'm some kind of criminal." The nerve was breathtaking, even for him. "Criminal is exactly what you are," I replied, my voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through my veins. "Theft by deception, misuse of marital assets, financial fraud. The investigator just documented what you were already doing." His hands shook as he flipped through images that showed his methodical betrayal in stark black and white. Each photograph told a story of calculated deception. "These are invasions of privacy. They'll never hold up in court." I smiled again, wider this time, enjoying his growing desperation. "We'll see about that." The confidence in my voice came from months of careful legal research. "You planned this entire evening, didn't you?" Adrian's voice carried a note of grudging respect mixed with pure fury. "The anniversary dinner, the timing, everything." His realization came too late to save him. I nodded, finally allowing myself to enjoy the moment I'd rehearsed in my mind countless times. "You always said I was too trusting, too passive." Maybe you were right. Maybe I needed to learn to play the game. The irony that he'd taught me to be strategic through his own betrayal wasn't lost on me. The waiter approached our table, clearly sensing the tension, but professionally required to check on our anniversary celebration. His timing was impeccable, arriving just as Adrian's world continued to crumble. "How is everything this evening?" he asked, his smile fading as he noticed Adrian's pale complexion and sweating forehead. "Perfect," I replied warmly, my voice carrying genuine satisfaction for the first time in months. "We're celebrating 15 wonderful years. Could we see the dessert menu?" Adrian stared at me in disbelief as the waiter left, clearly questioning my sanity and his own reality. "Dessert? Liora, we're getting divorced. Tonight. Right now." "Actually," I corrected, my voice calm and measured. "You're getting divorced. I'm getting dinner." The dessert menu arrived as Adrian frantically scrolled through his phone, probably texting Brielle to cancel whatever romantic evening he'd planned. His fingers moved desperately across the screen, trying to salvage something from this wreckage. "You can't do this to me," he muttered, typing furiously between glances at the legal documents. 15 years of marriage, and you're going to destroy me over one mistake? The audacity was breathtaking, even after months of witnessing his capacity for self-deception. "One mistake," I repeated, loud enough that the couple at the next table glanced over with barely concealed interest. 8 months of systematic theft and deception is one mistake? His phone buzzed with an incoming call, Brielle again, her persistence almost admirable. This time he answered, cupping his hand around the device in a pointless attempt at privacy. In the intimate confines of Vercelli's, his whispered conversation carried clearly to my ears. "I can't meet you tonight," I heard him whisper urgently. "Something's come up with Liora." I ordered the chocolate soufflé, partly because I'd always wanted to try it, partly because it would take 20 minutes to prepare. 20 minutes for Adrian to fully understand the scope of his situation. "Make it 2, I told the waiter, smiling sweetly. "We're not going anywhere." While we waited for dessert, Adrian made increasingly desperate phone calls, each one more frantic than the last. First his lawyer, who was apparently at his own anniversary dinner and less than thrilled to discuss emergency divorce strategy on a Saturday night. The conversation was brief and clearly unsatisfactory from Adrian's perspective. Then to Brielle, whose voice grew shrill enough that I could hear her through the phone demanding to know what was happening and why he was abandoning their carefully planned evening. "Tell her about the photographs," I suggested helpfully, taking a sip of the wine I'd ordered to complement dessert. "I'm sure she'd love to know that her secret relationship is now court evidence." Adrian's face cycled through several emotions before settling on defeat, the fight draining out of him like air from a punctured balloon. "She doesn't deserve to have her career destroyed over this," he said quietly, perhaps the first selfless thought he'd had in months. I almost laughed at his sudden concern for Brielle's welfare. "Her career? Adrian, she's been using company resources to help your affair. The hotel bookings traced back to her corporate credit card, the conference room you've been booking for private meetings. HR is going to have a field day." His mouth fell open in genuine shock. "You contacted my company?" "I contacted everyone who needed to know." The chocolate soufflé arrived, perfectly risen and dusted with powdered sugar, a small masterpiece of culinary art that seemed almost too beautiful to eat. I took a small spoonful, enjoying both the rich dessert and Adrian's mounting panic in equal measure. "You don't understand what you've done," he said, watching me eat with horrified fascination, as if my calm enjoyment of dessert was the most disturbing thing about this evening. Brielle could lose her job. She could be blacklisted from the entire industry. His concern for his mistress's welfare would have been touching if it weren't so hypocritical. I paused, spoon halfway to my mouth, considering his words with deliberate thoughtfulness. "And I could lose my husband, my financial security, and my faith in marriage." Funny how consequences work, isn't it? The restaurant had begun to empty around us, other couples finishing their romantic evenings and heading home to lives that weren't exploding in real time. "Liora, please. We can work this out. Counseling, therapy, whatever you want. Don't ruin 3 lives over anger." His plea carried the desperation of a man finally understanding the stakes. I set down my spoon and met his eyes directly, letting him see the steel that had always existed beneath my accommodating surface. "This isn't anger, Adrian. This is justice." His phone buzzed again, a text message that made him curse under his breath. "Brielle's at the hotel," Adrian said, reading from his phone with growing panic, his voice tight with stress. "She's asking if I'm coming. What am I supposed to tell her?" The image of Brielle waiting in some expensive hotel room, probably wearing something she thought would drive him wild, brought me a satisfaction I hadn't expected. I shrugged, taking another bite of the exquisite soufflé, savoring both the chocolate and the moment. "The truth might be refreshing for a change. Tell her that your wife discovered your affair and is taking you for everything you're worth." The brutal honesty of the statement seemed to hit him like a physical blow. His hands trembled as he typed a response, probably some sanitized version of the truth. "This is cruel, Liora. Even for you." Cruel? The word echoed in my mind as I processed the accusation with growing disbelief. Cruel would be pretending I didn't know and letting you humiliate me publicly. Cruel would be allowing you to continue stealing from our daughter's future. Cruel would be letting Brielle believe she was special instead of just another woman you used. Adrian's phone rang, Brielle calling again, her patience apparently exhausted. This time he declined immediately, his face pale with dread. "She's going to keep calling until I explain." "Then explain," I said simply, my voice carrying a hardness he'd never heard before. "Tell her exactly what kind of man she's been sleeping with." As Adrian struggled with his phone, I pulled out my own device and showed him the screen with deliberate theatricality. "I've taken the liberty of recording tonight's conversation," I said, displaying the voice recording app that had been running since we sat down. "For legal purposes, of course." The app showed a continuous recording, capturing every word of his confession and panic. His face went purple with rage, veins standing out on his forehead. "You recorded me without consent? That's illegal in this state." His legal knowledge was about as reliable as his marriage vows. I smiled patiently, the way I used to when explaining basic concepts to our daughter during homework sessions. "Actually, Adrian, this state has single-party consent laws for recording. Since I'm party to this conversation, it's perfectly legal." The legal knowledge I'd gained over the past 3 months of preparation was already paying off in ways I hadn't anticipated. "Besides, you've said nothing tonight that contradicts what's already documented in the divorce filing." His breathing became labored, the stress finally taking a visible physical toll on his 45-year-old body. "I need air," he gasped, loosening his tie. "I can't breathe." "Finish your soufflé first," I suggested with mock concern. "It's delicious, and we're paying for it." Adrian pushed back from the table so suddenly that his chair scraped loudly against the floor, drawing stares from the remaining diners and causing a minor scene. "I'm not playing your sick game anymore," he declared, loud enough that several nearby conversations stopped entirely. "I'm leaving." The dramatic declaration fell flat in the intimate restaurant setting. I nodded calmly, not looking up from my dessert, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. "Of course you are. That's what you do when things get difficult." The accusation hit its mark with surgical precision. For 15 years, Adrian had walked away from every challenge, failed business ventures, financial problems, family responsibilities. Running away was his signature move, his default response to adversity. "The papers are already filed," I continued conversationally, my voice carrying clearly through the restaurant's hushed atmosphere. "Leaving now won't change anything except making you look even more unstable." He stood frozen beside the table, clearly torn between his desire to escape and the dawning realization that escape was no longer possible. The legal machinery was already in motion, and his tantrum couldn't stop it. "Sit down, Adrian. Let's finish this conversation like adults." Reluctantly, he sank back into his chair, defeat written across his features like a roadmap of poor decisions. "How long have you known?" Adrian asked quietly, his fight finally extinguished, replaced by a hollow resignation. The question I'd been expecting since the envelope appeared, the one he should have asked months ago. "About Brielle specifically?" 3 months. "About your general unhappiness with our marriage?" "Probably 2 years." I finished the last spoonful of soufflé, enjoying the rich chocolate flavor that somehow tasted even better with victory. "You're not as subtle as you think you are." The late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the sudden interest in working out, it was like following a script from a bad movie. His shoulders sagged under the weight of his predictability. "Why didn't you confront me then? Why wait until tonight?" The answer was complex, involving months of strategic planning, legal consultation, and emotional preparation that he couldn't begin to understand. "Because confronting you would have given you time to prepare, time to hide assets, time to control the story. This way, I controlled when and how our marriage ended." The power in that statement felt intoxicating after years of reactive living. His phone buzzed again. Brielle's persistence was becoming almost comical in its desperation. "Answer it," I suggested, my voice dripping with false sweetness. "Tell her you're busy destroying your life." Adrian finally answered Brielle's call, his voice hollow and defeated, like a man reading his own obituary. "Brielle, I can't see you tonight. Or any night. My wife knows about us." The words seemed to physically pain him as he spoke them. I couldn't hear her response, but I could imagine the explosion of questions and accusations erupting through the phone. Adrian listened for a moment, then looked at me with something approaching respect mixed with terror. "No, she didn't just find out. She's known for months. She planned this whole thing." There was a long pause, and I could almost hear Brielle's world crumbling through the silence. Then he winced as if the phone had burned him, her voice rising to levels audible even to me. "She's threatening to call your supervisor tomorrow morning." I raised an eyebrow questioningly, and he nodded miserably, confirming my suspicion about Brielle's priorities. "The recording you made of our conversation tonight," he said to me, his voice barely above a whisper. "She wants you to destroy it." I shook my head slowly, savoring the moment. "Tell Brielle that ship has sailed." The recordings, the photographs, the financial records, everything's already been submitted to the court. Adrian relayed the message with the enthusiasm of a man delivering a death sentence, and I could hear Brielle's voice rising to a shriek before the line went dead. "She hung up on me," Adrian said, staring at his silent phone with the expression of a man watching his world collapse in real time. "She's probably calling her lawyer right now." The speed with which Brielle had abandoned him was almost poetic in its justice. I signaled for the check, ready to end this phase of my carefully planned evening, satisfied that the first act of this drama was complete. Smart woman. She'll need one. The waiter approached with obvious relief, probably grateful that our table's drama was finally concluding and normal restaurant operations could resume. As I paid the bill, using my personal credit card, not our joint account, Adrian sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of his situation. "What happens now?" he asked as I calculated the tip with deliberate precision. "Now you go to whatever hotel you had planned and think about how you're going to rebuild your life with whatever assets the court leaves you." I stood, gathering my purse and coat with unhurried movements. "I suggest you start job hunting immediately. Brielle won't be the only casualty when HR reviews those credit card statements." His face went white as the employment implications finally hit him, adding another layer to his mounting problems. The evening had exceeded even my highest expectations. Outside the restaurant, Adrian grabbed my arm as I headed toward my car, his grip desperate and slightly painful. "Liora, wait. We need to discuss custody arrangements, financial support, the logistics of separation." His touch felt foreign and unwelcome after 15 years of marriage. I gently but firmly removed his hand from my arm, noting how his touch felt foreign after 15 years of marriage, like contact with a stranger. "All of that is outlined in the divorce papers. Your lawyer can review them once you retain someone competent." The cool night air felt refreshing after the intense atmosphere inside the restaurant, cleansing in a way I hadn't expected. "You can't just walk away like this," he protested, his voice taking on a whining quality. "We have 15 years of history together. That has to count for something." I turned to face him fully, this man who had shared my bed, my dreams, my life for over a decade, trying to reconcile the stranger before me with the man I'd once loved. "It counted for everything, Adrian. Until you decided it didn't." My car keys felt solid and reassuring in my hand, symbols of the independence I was about to reclaim, tools of my liberation. "Goodbye, Adrian. I hope Brielle was worth it." The finality in my voice surprised even me. As I drove home through the familiar streets of our neighborhood, my phone rang constantly, Adrian calling repeatedly, probably panicking as the full scope of his situation became clear. Each ring felt like a small victory, proof that my plan was working exactly as intended. I let each call go to voicemail, focusing instead on the road ahead and the life I was about to rebuild from the ashes of his betrayal. At home, I sat in our kitchen, soon to be my kitchen, and listened to the messages with the detachment of a scientist studying specimens. The progression was fascinating: anger, denial, bargaining, and finally, desperate pleading that would have moved me months ago. "Liora, please call me back. We can work this out. I'll give up everything, leave Brielle, go to counseling, whatever you want." But it was too late for negotiations, too late for the compromises I'd once been willing to make. The time for compromise had passed the moment he decided to celebrate our anniversary by asking for a divorce. I deleted the messages systematically and poured myself a glass of wine, toasting the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The wine tasted like freedom. The next morning brought a flurry of activity as the legal machinery I'd set in motion began to grind forward with bureaucratic efficiency. My lawyer called to confirm that Adrian had contacted his office 3 times before 8 a.m., desperate to understand his options and growing more frantic with each conversation. "He's asking about emergency motions to freeze the divorce proceedings," she reported with barely concealed amusement. I explained that the ship has sailed on emergency interventions. The beauty of proper planning was becoming clear. Meanwhile, my phone showed 17 missed calls from Adrian and 4 voicemails from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably Brielle trying to reach me through intermediaries, attempting damage control. I forwarded all unknown calls to voicemail and went about my morning routine with newfound peace, enjoying the silence of a house no longer filled with lies and deception. The coffee tasted better somehow, the morning news more interesting, the sunrise more beautiful than I'd noticed in months. Freedom, I was discovering, had its own unique flavor, and I was developing quite a taste for it. The future stretched ahead of me, unencumbered by his betrayal. By noon, the fallout had expanded beyond our personal drama into a wider circle of consequences. My sister called to report that Adrian had contacted every member of my family, pleading for them to intervene on his behalf like some kind of emotional terrorist. "He's telling everyone you've had some kind of breakdown," she said, her voice mixing concern with disbelief at his audacity. "He wants us to stage an intervention." The desperation was almost pitiable. I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months, the sound surprising me with its genuine joy. What did you tell him? I told him that the only person who needs an intervention is a man stupid enough to cheat on a forensic accountant. The family's response had been swift and unanimous, complete support for my decision and my methods. Even my traditionally conservative parents had expressed pride in my strength and strategic planning. Your father wants to know if you need help changing the locks, my sister added with obvious satisfaction. He's ready to drive down this afternoon with his toolbox. The offer was tempting, but I'd already scheduled a locksmith for tomorrow morning. The wheels of my revenge were turning perfectly, each gear clicking into place with mechanical precision. 3 weeks later, I stood in my newly redecorated living room, surveying the space that no longer bore any trace of Adrian's presence or the lies that had contaminated our home. The divorce had proceeded with mechanical efficiency, exactly as I'd planned during those long months of preparation. Adrian's desperate attempts to negotiate had fallen flat against the ironclad evidence I'd assembled with the thoroughness of a prosecutor building a case. Brielle had indeed lost her job, fired for misuse of company resources and violation of workplace conduct policies, her career prospects in the industry effectively destroyed. Adrian himself was facing disciplinary review at his firm for the same reasons, his professional reputation in tatters. The house was mine, the retirement accounts were divided according to the postnuptial agreement's infidelity clause, and my future was entirely my own to shape however I chose. My daughter had called from college to express her support and pride in my handling of the situation with such grace under pressure. "Mom, I always knew you were strong," she'd said, her voice filled with admiration. "I just never knew you were strategic." Neither had Adrian, until it was far too late to matter. Justice tasted sweeter than any anniversary dinner ever could. 6 months after that anniversary dinner, I received an unexpected text from Adrian that appeared on my phone like a ghost from a past life. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what I threw away. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I was too stupid and selfish to realize it until it was gone." I read the message twice, analyzing it like the forensic accountant I was, then deleted it without responding or feeling any emotional impact. The man who had tried to humiliate me in public, who had stolen from our family's future, who had planned his escape while lying to my face every single day, that man's regret was irrelevant to my new life. I was building something better now, something that belonged entirely to me and reflected my true values. The forensic accounting firm I'd started was thriving, specializing in cases like my own, women discovering financial infidelity and fighting back with legal precision. My first client had thanked me with tears in her eyes. "You showed me that I didn't have to be a victim." That's exactly what Adrian's betrayal had taught me, in the most painful and ultimately liberating way possible. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing you do for yourself. So that's my story. What would you have done? Craving more secrets, lies, and betrayal? This is just the beginning. Hit subscribe. You won't believe what comes next.